At the end of this calculation course, I suggest that we take a look at some slightly more challenging calculation exercises. And the name of this chapter appropriately is Overcoming Resistance. And as I explained at the end of the previous video, we all have a certain resistance or a certain threshold after which it becomes uncomfortable to calculate certain variations or visualize them. And reasons for that are multiple. It can be that you're having problem visualizing long variations, or you're reluctant to leave your king out in the open so that your opponent can check it. Sometimes we get too content with the variations that we have calculated, and then we just don't feel like we should calculate any further, when in fact we should. And there's all sorts of psychological or simply technical ways that your mind can sort of resist the need to calculate further. And this is why I have compiled some exercises. Some of them we will see in this short video, just as an introduction to the topic. And the other ones you can solve in the quiz section, where you will face maybe some challenges solving them. But this is okay. This is the way we improve in anything. Likewise in chess and in this skill of calculation. At some point you have to simply solve more challenging problems, and in this way your sort of calculation muscle will grow, and you will be able to gradually calculate more difficult and difficult positions. So here we will see several such examples. The first one that we have on the board, again a simple looking position but not an easy one. The material has been quite reduced, but the position itself is sharp. It is white to move, and we can immediately see that black is the one who has some threats. So if it was black to move, again, let's use prophylactic thinking first. There is this rook g1 threat, but then actually if we look a bit deeper, it's not really anything special. The king can go to h2 and it's fairly safe there. So black doesn't have a strong follow-up yet. And that's a useful information, because now we can try to see, since there is no immediate threat to the king, what can white do? What are white's candidates? There is one check, rook takes f7, and this at best can lead to a perpetual check, because the queen and bishop cannot really force a checkmate here. So without much calculation we can see that this doesn't work if you want to win. Then we can take the pawn on g5 with the queen, but this looks quite risky, and after all there is no strong threat with this move. There is a stronger threat with the move queen d5, and this is a move that we should calculate before queen g5. It's more forced, because with queen d5 we are threatening a checkmate in 2. And this is the move that we will focus on. Now black of course can give a check, rook g1, king goes to h2, and what then? Then there is another check in that position, and we have to sacrifice a rook as black, but actually this check gives maybe black an opportunity to play for checkmate. Let us see. This check is queen b8, so we have to go all the way here. Then after the king takes rook on g1, there is queen g3 check. So this is something for which you need to use some visualization. And the point of this is that the king cannot go to f1 because queen f2 checkmate. And likewise, if bishop g2, queen takes f2 will lead to a checkmate on the dark squares. And so the only move there is king h1. Now queen takes h3 is another check. Note that the bishop on f3 is protected because white queen is on d5. So king is on h1, queen takes, gives check on h3, king goes to g1, queen goes back to g3, and this seems like a draw, because we saw that king f1 and bishop g2 don't work. And you might just stop there and say, okay, this is a draw and queen d5 doesn't work. But still, it's good to always calculate the variation until the end, not to make early assumptions. So let's look one more time. After this queen h3, king g1, queen g3. King h1 is a draw. What about this move bishop g2 again? So queen takes f2 check. And then when the king moves to h2, because otherwise it's queen g1 checkmate. Now after queen g1 there is a move king h3, and this move was not possible while white pawn was on h3. So in fact taking the pawn on h3 was helpful for white. So while the pawn was on h3 he could not play this move king h3, and now after this king h3 actually white defends from checkmate and his upper rook. So we can see this here. I'm gonna make the moves now. So since queen f7 is such a strong threat, black should go for this forcing variation. And now, as we saw, this line doesn't work because here the king cannot go to h3, so it has to go to the dark square. And now this is a typical way to force a checkmate on the dark squares. If king goes to h2, check, then a discover check and checkmate on g3. Or if the king goes towards the center, we have also a nice mating setup here with queen e3. But let us come back now to this position where we give, so queen g3, we go king h1, so queen h3 check, and it looks like the same position, but the only difference is there is no pawn on h3, and this is the key difference because now we can do this. Now we can play like this, and you see h3 square is available for the king, so now it's safe. There is one more check, queen e3, then we can cover our king with queen f3. And we're winning. Otherwise, the other difference is that without the h3 pawn, this check is possible. But it doesn't matter because we have now we have the h3 square for the bishop, and we can defend against these threats by bringing back our queen. And let's see, one more check, just in case. King g2, and now we're just up on material. So it's very easy to assume that there is a perpetual check if we don't check this fully. So here it's just easy to assume that we have to play king h1, but actually if you look at the position more carefully, the absence of h3 pawn is actually in white's and not in black's favor. There is one more interesting moment in this position. Let us come back here. So we've established that queen d5 is the best move. And now, besides this forced move rook g1, black has a way to defend against the checkmate, at least temporarily. And he can do it with this move king h6. And this move also contains a devious trap. So take some time to try to find the trap, opponent's resource. I will give you a hint. White cannot take, he cannot play queen takes f7. Threatening checkmate. And the reason for that is that if we take on f7, black will have a very nice stalemate option. So here he has three pieces. His king is in stalemate, but he has three pieces. So what he has to do is sacrifice them all with a check. So check has to be taken, another check, and then whichever way you take, I'm sacrificing all my pieces, and it's a draw. So this is the idea that you can see in these simple positions in endgame studies very often, but we don't see that often in positions with queens on the board. So it's really a nice application here. And this is why, in this position, once black plays king, not rook g1, but king h6, white should look for another candidate move. So the most obvious move, queen takes f7, doesn't work, but he has a winning move, which creates a very strong threat, h4. At the same time, we open the h3 square, so this whole variation with rook g1 and queen g3 doesn't work for the same reason. We can simply block with bishop g2, and otherwise there is a checkmate with queen f7 or taking on g5. So a very tricky position. You can expect some positions like that in the quiz section in this chapter. Let us see another interesting position. We're looking from black's perspective. Take some time to figure out what is going on here. So we have opposite colored bishops, material is balanced, all the heavy pieces are on the board, and it is black to move. So his rook is hanging. But when you look at this position more carefully, you will get a feeling that there is something here. White king is just too exposed, and his dark squares can be vulnerable. So we have to look for a winning move here. Now what black did in this game, he played rook h7, so he didn't see any way to force his attack, and he just retreated the rook, and then the game continued. However, we have to look at these force moves. We have to overcome resistance, because it's very easy to just give up and say, okay, there is nothing. You have to look at these force moves first. And so checks like rook h2 and rook e2 obviously will not work. Not enough firepower. But we can see that there is a mating pattern with two rooks on the second rank if we somehow deflect the queen from b5, so that we can give this rook e2 check. And there is a way to deflect the queen. It's with the move queen takes c6. So this is the first point. If we take on c6 and he takes back, after rook e2, white king will indeed be in the mating net. You can see it here. And if king goes to h1, we have rook h2. If he sacks the rook, now a combination of discover check and then checks on the second rank will also decide the game. So rook h2, and then the other rook joins the game. Check, and then rook h1 checkmate is inevitable. So is this why a player with black didn't play, or did he miss queen c6? No, he actually saw queen c6, but he thought that it doesn't work because of the move queen c4. And of course, checks should be calculated before capture, so queen c4 check, and then after the king moves, he takes the rook. And this is where he stopped. He saw that he's losing material, and that his idea with rooks on the second rank will not work, and he just declined this queen takes c6 idea and played rook h7. However, queen takes c6 does work, and we just have to overcome this resistance. We have to force ourselves to look further. So there is a move after g takes h4, you may look for it, which actually gives, king g7, which actually gives black a very strong attack, despite the material disadvantage. And this move is queen e8. The idea is, again, to bring our rook to the second rank and attack the king. So, as we can see, white has no good move to oppose the penetration to the second rank. And after that, whether the king goes to h1 or h3, my next move is probably going to be queen e5, although I probably have other ways to attack as well. But this is the immediate threat. Rook e2 and queen e5, and then we have mating threats. And once you see this, you should be quite excited about black's position, because his attacking chances are huge. This bishop on d4 is extremely strong, and once the rook gets to the second rank, it's going to be very dangerous for white. At the same time, black king is quite safe. So this is one other case when we just have to overcome our resistance to calculating variations and force ourselves to calculate more and further, and that way we will come to the ultimate truth in the position. And the last example that I want to show here, so here white king is in check, a sharp position, because also black queen is hanging, and white is a bit undeveloped, but he should be, if everything works out fine for him, he should be close to winning, because he's up a pawn and some of his pieces are really strong, like rook on d5, queen on e3. So here white just has to be careful. And what is the move that you would intuitively play in this position as white? When somebody gives you a check like that, probably most of us would retreat to f1, because this looks like the safest square for the king. There is also a move king h3, so we have to keep both in mind. But king h3 looks quite risky, right? The king on h3, when it's cut off on the g file, is one move away from being checkmated. So you might have like an urge to play a move king f1 simply by eliminating a move king h3 on general grounds. But you should overcome this urge to play the move immediately and calculate variations instead. Because chess is such a game where none of general rules apply in every situation, and it's good to look for exceptions. And in this case, let's calculate king f1 first. So after king f1, our king is not that safe, because if the queen comes to h3, it's checkmate. So we should look the move queen c8. It's the most obvious candidate, threatening queen h3. And now to stop queen h3, there's two moves for white. So let me show it here. There is h3, of course, and there is f4. Now, in case of h3, the problem for white is that with queen c8, black has also made contact with the bishop here, and now the move bishop g5 is extremely annoying, because after f4, also the king on f1 makes this combination possible. Rook f6, and the bad thing for white here is that he can't take on f6, because g takes f6 and the knight is protected, but also rook takes e5 doesn't work. And you can see that the problem is not in rook takes f4, but rather this nice move, and white is just collapsing immediately. So this is why h3 is not good. Bishop g5, a very strong move, and f4 should be preferred. But then knight comes to g4, and suddenly the king, once this bishop is traded off, the king feels unsafe, and this position is not clear at all, because queen c2 is probably coming, and we cannot say that white is better here because he's so undeveloped. So king f1, even though it seems like an automatic move where the king feels safe, actually turns out by pure calculation that it is not. And in that case, we have to turn to king h3. No matter how anesthetic it looks, it's still a viable candidate move, because I am making a contact with the bishop on h4. So this time there will be no queen c8. We can simply take the bishop. No fear, because if you don't see what your opponent can do, then you should play it. Black doesn't have any checks, it doesn't have any mating patterns as well, and I'm threatening to take on e5, and as we can see here, this check doesn't work because queen h6 and we are winning material. Completely winning position. So this is why after king h3 black should keep defending this bishop, but in that case we can probably, well, I think maybe the simplest thing to do is to play rook g1 just to secure the king. We can probably also play f4, but no reason why not to play rook g1, trade off this rook, and then bring our king back to safety with an extra pawn. So in this case, it was mostly a psychological barrier, right? When somebody gives you a check, of course you want to protect your king, but it's always good to check for concrete variations to confirm or refute your theory. So I hope that also the positions in the quiz will be helpful to you. They might be slightly more challenging than those from the previous chapters, but as I said, this is fine. Try to always challenge yourself with the difficult positions that might take you more time to solve, or you may not even be able to solve. But when you see the solution, then maybe you will get some new ideas. And just in general, with more and more practice, you should improve your calculation skill. So I hope that the course was helpful to you, and that the methods and ideas that I have presented will find use in your games and in your practice. And I hope to see you next time with some other video course.